Strange but true stories. Tales from the light side, the dark side, and the other side. I'm Steve White. I've always been fascinated by the phenomenon of deja vu, and like many, have had those moments of believing or knowing that I have seen something before or been in a place before. Translated from French literally as already seen, it can be an eerie feeling of having caught a glimpse of the future. But what if what you experienced wasn't just an instant? What if it was your entire day? What if you lived a day of your life not just once, or even twice, but 3 times? Our story today was sent to us by a viewer just like you who had something like that happen to him. It was the summer of 2005. I lived in a small town named Keller, Texas, which is about 18 miles north of Fort Worth. I had just finished the 4th grade at Hidden Lakes Elementary, go Mustangs, and I was looking forward to going to intermediate school next year, which in Texas is for just 5th and 6th grade. But I also knew that I would not be going to the one in Keller because my parents were going through a divorce, and I would soon move with my mom and sister to California. It was as amicable a divorce as I could imagine. Even after all this happened, my parents stayed on good terms with each other. I tell you that because my dad helped us relocate later that summer. I spent most of my remaining time in Keller saying goodbye to my friends around the neighborhood and helping pack up all my stuff, piling it into a U-Haul truck and our SUV. Once I came to terms with the sadness of leaving Keller, it kind of felt like we were starting a Wild West adventure. We took off on I-20, going west towards El Paso, rather than taking I-35 north to Oklahoma City. My parents spent most of the morning packing up, and so we got a late start that day and only made it to Abilene. It's about 3 hours down the road. I remember stopping at a gas station to refuel and get snacks, and I remember getting a pickle. I remember that specifically because my younger sister was asleep at the time when we stopped, and she was mad that no one woke her up to get a pickle. Anyway, we pulled into a La Quinta to stop for the night. The next morning, we ate breakfast and headed back out on the road, and as we were pulling back on the freeway, I saw a McDonald's with a huge play structure with a statue of the Hamburglar by the base of the slide. And, being 9 years old, I wasn't about to pass something like that up without a fight. So I recall asking nonstop to pull into a McDonald's, any McDonald's. Well, one with a playground at least. It finally reached a point when my dad told me to shut up or I was going to get spanked. So I got quiet. There's a lot of desert in that part of the state and not a whole lot to look at. So I remember I looked up at the moon, at the man in the moon, my 9-year-old self thought, and I had a weird feeling that it, or he, was looking back at me, almost with a grin, like it or he knew something I didn't yet. Sounds crazy, right? But that's how I felt when I looked up at that full moon. We made it into El Paso and kept going across the line into New Mexico before we stopped again for the night, pulling into another La Quinta around midnight. We were all really tired from driving most of the day and were quickly asleep. Now, here's where the story gets weird. The next day, we got up, packed our stuff, and again, we were in a La Quinta for a second straight night, so I figured that they were all alike with the same layout and stuff. And we got dressed and we went for breakfast, but the lobby looked a little different than I remembered when we walked through the night before. Well, it was late when we arrived, so I didn't give it any more thought, and again, I was 9. We all pile into the respective cars, and I notice hills in the distance. I hadn't seen those on the way in the night before, but then again, it was dark when we got there the previous evening, and so I must not have seen them. We head towards the freeway, and that's when I saw it. McDonald's and the Hamburglar statue next to the big play structure. Wait, we're in the same city that we started off in yesterday. This is Abilene. Now, I know what you're thinking. There's a bazillion McDonald's with Hamburglar statues and play structures, but I know this is the same place we drove past the day before. My family didn't notice a thing. It didn't register. I remember asking my dad why we were here again. But my dad didn't understand my question. I kept asking why we were back in the same town again. He got irritated again at my persistence and told me that we had never been here before and for me to sit back down and put my seatbelt on. Now, my dad wasn't as big of a jerk as his story makes him sound. He was just grumpy from the stress of moving. But then my sister seemed to realize it too. She was only 4 at the time, and I don't remember what she said to make me think that, but I just remember she realized we had been here yesterday too. I didn't know the concept of deja vu then, but now that I understand it, this was some serious deja vu. We had the same drive across the state, into the night. One difference for me, though, was later that day I switched cars and got into my mom's SUV while my dad drove the U-Haul. I was in the front seat and remember cheering with Mom and my sister as we crossed the state line again into New Mexico. I remember the sign and there being a sort of truck stop by it, and it saying you are now leaving Texas and something like, "Come back soon." I figured that I must have just been mistaken about the whole repeat of the day before. Not a carbon copy, just a repeat of where we started and where we ended up. And of course, we pulled into a La Quinta for the night. This sounds like a commercial for La Quinta, but my parents really liked the chain, so that's where we stayed. So we checked in, headed up to our room, crashed, slept well, woke up the next day and, yep, you guessed it, hills in the distance, and when we started driving, there it was again. The McDonald's, the Hamburglar statue in the play area. Back in Abilene. Now this time I knew we had been there before, and my sister did too. We tried to explain to my dad what was going on, but he eventually got so fed up with both of us, he shouted at us, "We haven't been here before. Maybe you have with your mom, but not with me. Now shut up so I can drive." So, we did. Again, a drive through the Texas desert. We stopped at a road stop and I switched into Mom's SUV. I told her I was concerned that we were reliving the same day over and over. I told her that the past 2 nights we had crossed into New Mexico, but here we were again driving through the dry Texas desert in the summertime. She just kept telling us we were kids and must be confused. How much do you press it when both adult figures in your life tell you that what you know is true is false? It has to be false, because here we are driving towards El Paso, crossing over the Texas-New Mexico border, seeing the sign saying that we're leaving Texas and come back soon. I had been reassured by my parents that we hadn't been in Abilene the 2 previous days. We cheered again as we passed into New Mexico, but what awaited us in the morning? I mean, I didn't particularly want to leave Texas, but I sort of wanted to get to California eventually. Now, one thing I should mention about that day before moving on is that I took a moment to look up at the moon again. And strangely, it was a crescent, not full like I had seen just 2 days prior. I remember from school that it takes about a month to go through the phases, and it was kind of strange to see. Anyway, we stopped for the night at the same La Quinta, checked in, went up to the same room, crashed, and slept well. But when we got up the next day, I felt different than I had the previous days. The lobby of this La Quinta looked like it had the night before. We got into the car and headed off to the highway, and no McDonald's, no Hamburglar, no play area. We were in New Mexico, not Abilene, Texas. The rest of the trip was normal. We settled into a city called Carmichael outside Sacramento, and life went on. When I was a little older, I talked with my dad about that trip. He was a science nerd kind of guy, and he actually believed what I experienced. He thought that maybe I entered a time slip. But he also remembered only taking one day to Abilene and the next day into New Mexico. Sadly, I don't have the opportunity to relive that trip with him anymore. He passed away in 2009. I've talked about it with my sister, though, and even though she was 4 at the time, she also remembers it taking 3 days or 3 tries to get out of Texas. But she's still a little salty about not getting that pickle on the first day, though. This has been another strange but true story, submitted to us by a viewer just like you. So, what do you think? time slip or memory slip? A glitch in reality or just a 9-year-old not wanting to leave home and making the trip longer than it actually was? Let us know what you think in the comments below. Subscribe if you haven't already, and sign up for notifications so you know when the next video drops to the channel. And if you have a story you'd like to share with us, send us an email to strangebutTrueStories2@gmail.com. Thanks for all the support. You are a cool and supportive group of people, and for that, we are grateful. Thanks for watching this video. I'm Steve White. Until next time.